Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is someone whose electrons, at least, are coming halfway around the globe. This is a gentleman that I really just resonated with right off the bat. And when you hear him, I think you'll see why I did resonate with him so much and still do, why I'd want him to be here to talk with us. And his name is Bruce Ross. And you can find him. His website is flowpreneur.co, C-O, flowpreneur.co. He is a transformational leadership coach, which I think is one of the things that we connect on. And on LinkedIn, you can find him at linkedin.com/in/Bruce S. Ross. So, and Bruce is coming to us from New Zealand right now. Is that right, Bruce?
Absolutely. Yes, you can tell by my accent, I'm not American.
There you go. There you go. Well, we won't hold it against you if you don't hold it against us. How's that?
Yeah, deal.
Okay. So, and where in New Zealand are you, Bruce?
If anyone knows it, I'm in the North Island. I'm in an area called the Bay of Plenty, and it is probably as close to California in terms of the weather. There's a surf beach called Mount Maunganui, very similar to California, not quite as warm, but there's citrus trees. I'm in a rural area. There's citrus trees and there's kiwi fruit and avocados, and it's a very it's plentiful.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. It's definitely one of my dreams to come eat kiwi fruit like in New Zealand, you know? So maybe one day COVID will allow us to travel again, or the lack of COVID will somehow get over this. But in the meantime, I would love to talk a little bit with you about leadership and your extensive experience working with top leaders, forward-thinking leaders on transformation, on being up to big things in the world, and what makes the difference in their results at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not getting paid by the hour, you know?
Yes.
So Bruce, what is when I say leadership communication, what comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is communication from oneself to oneself.
Very good.
The sense of integration.
I couldn't agree more.
The sense of integration, because if I want to speak to you and I'm feeling discombobulated or I'm feeling disconnected, then what comes across, even though the words may make sense, they don't quite land. You don't get it. So there's two parts. Yeah. There's two parts of communication. There's my intent, and then there's the impact. So I could have my intention is I've got to get information across, but the impact is it could be informational from your end. You've got the information, but has it actually landed? Have you felt it? Have I connected with and to you? So there's two parts. So whilst I can think I've done a great job because I've stood up in a meeting and I've shared information or shared from my perspective, it's not so much what I've shared, it's what the people walk away with when they walk out the door.
Right.
So if I can take So Karen.
Yeah, please. No, please.
Okay. If I could take that one step further, because I believe that what lies at the core of leadership is, in fact, energy. It's a different approach than most people. What do I mean? So when we have high energy levels, think, my arms are spread wide at the moment. Our thinking does this. So we can think more broadly. We're more intuitive, more perceptive, more confident, more relaxed, more authentic, more able to take the hits. We're a better selves. Yep. When our energy level is low, we are disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from others. We are more blamey. We withdraw. Well, we go one of two ways. We either withdraw and avoid, or we implode or explode. And so when it comes to leadership, you literally can't lead if your energy level is low. If your energy level is high, then I'm feeling relaxed in myself. I can feel more open. And that's what people pick up on. So what happens with communication, because communication, yes, there's the words piece. And then they say that, I don't know, you probably know better than I do, something like 2/3 is Body language. Well, it's not just the body language. You're actually picking up my energy, yes, in my body language, but you're picking up where I'm coming from, how I'm located in myself as I say it, how relaxed or not. And you take your cue from that. So there's a heck of a lot around communication. But this whole energy piece, I think, is fundamental because just for our own well-being, let alone, because the job of a leader is to give energy. The job of your followers is to suck your energy. And so therefore, you've got to have energy to give. Therefore, you need to know where you're losing energy and how to top up with high-quality energy. But that's a slightly different conversation than communication. But I just want to put that context. So when you said to me about communication, I think the first place is how energized are you in yourself? How relaxed, how open, how connected, how clear are you? And then from that place, you can connect with other people.
Yeah. So being clear with yourself and managing your energy is the first step to a great communication outcome.
Correct.
So one of the things that I say in my training a lot is that I mean, it's a story that I share about how I was always really interested in checking the box I said it. And I really wasn't very interested in checking the box they got it. I even know about that box, right? But boy, I would check the box. I told you so. I said it. I told you so all day.
Yeah.
That didn't get me the results I wanted. What really altered everything in terms of my results was when I realized that that's what I'd been doing. And I took on the challenge of not checking the box I said it. That doesn't get me anything. Reaching over there and checking the box I landed it.
Nice. Good distinction.
And I think that I couldn't do that till I was clear. And I think that was part of what was getting in my way, was that I was just not clear about my messages and where I was coming from. And I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about this whole concept of managing your energy.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the key things that you see in the leaders that you work with where they're, I guess the obvious question would be, how do people most regularly mismanage their energy, and what could they do to manage it better?
Yeah, absolutely. So at one level, there's almost like the basics, energy basics. What do I mean by that? Well, there's sleep, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
There's hydration, and you referred to your new hydration regime before we started. We need we need lots of water, absolutely. Food, nutrition, exercise, breath work. I mean, those are the basics, and they will give you a good amount of energy. That said, I've still met and worked with depressed, fit people. So they go to the gym, they still work out, they eat good food, but there's still something else.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at and what I'm interested in is how to maintain peak mental and emotional states. So in terms of energy, I think a general consideration, I call it energy intelligence. We need to ask and answer 3 questions. The first question is, what leaks my energy? Second question is, how do I top up with the best quality energy? Because we can top up with fast food type energy, but it's only got a very short shelf life. And then the third is, how do I optimize? So the first one is, let's assume for a moment you've got exercise, you've got the sleep, you've got those routines in place.
Mm-hmm. Then I mean, that's already kind of a high bar. Like you said, sleep, hydration, food, exercise, and breath work, as if those are foundational already, right? So I want to hear where you're going to go with this, but I want to dig into that for just a second. Like, let's say that someone that's listening is not really super focused on sleep, hydration, food, exercise, and breath work. Like, not to sidetrack us, because I'm interested in going where you're going. But what would you say to someone just in a quick conversation about that stuff? Why it's worth it, and maybe a place to start even.
Okay. Well, the place to start. The place to start is go to someone who's incredibly sick, or recall when you've been incredibly sick, and then you appreciate what you got. So it's almost like we need to be shocked out of complacency. Sleep is something that we can do something about. Sleep is, it's like the silver. If there was a silver bullet, it's the silver bullet. It's better than any supplement you can ever get. It is. We don't understand fully what sleep is, but it's highly restorative, and there's so much around at the moment that whatever sleep you're getting, add another half hour.
Well, and I just really want to say amen, brother, to that, because what you said, it's fundamental, and it's better than the best vitamins. It's better than all these other things that I think people try to substitute for sleep. And I almost died finding out the hard way that
really
I almost died of an autoimmune disease. I lost my company. We'd raised over $80 million, and then we went out of business in the .com crash. Wow. And I almost died of an autoimmune disease. And it turns out that I believe that an enormous piece of that was that I had not been sleeping enough for about 2-3 years doing this company. And I was playing that self-righteous game of I slept less than you did last night, so I win. That's not a game that I ever want to win again. That was a losing game to win, you know?
Yeah. So there are biological elements that we really must learn to dance with, live with, not fight. And sleep, as you've just gone through, sleep is one. The hydration piece, hydration, I mean, we are, whatever it is, 2/3 liquid anyway. But also
just look at Earth in space, and that's us. Right?
Absolutely. But the other thing too, I just found out the other day that makes absolute sense is one of the greatest an antithesis to inflammation, which is pretty much most disease, is oxygen. Oxygenation of the cells, oxygenation throughout the body. And of course, H2O, every time you drink water, there's oxygen in that. And so that's another way of thinking about it. If you want to have a dull head, like a hangover head, don't drink water. Because there you are in the afternoon. You're trying to think or trying to be creative from a sludge head. Drink yourself some water, and then you'll notice a difference immediately. So even that, and I know that's quite challenging. So it's one of those things you got to. Right now, I've just got my liter of water in front of me. As you see,
I love it. Yeah, it's great. Well, and I just switched over this hydration commitment I mentioned to you. It's because I was reading somewhere, and it made a lot of sense to me. Sleep is dehydrating because you're laying there for 8 hours, breathing, and not drinking anything. So for me to wake up and look, I love having a nice cup of coffee. I drink half and put a little, soy milk in there, and but if I was starting that way, and that's dehydrating, right? That coffee is it's going to pull some water out, and that's okay if there's water to pull out. But I've started coming downstairs with my coffee and a big old thing of herbal tea. And I drink a glass of water first thing, and then have my coffee, and then follow up with some herbal tea all day, so that I'm just keeping myself hydrated. And if I feel vastly different.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll notice it too in terms of I do a bit of running, and if I haven't kept up with the water when I go for a run, my joints are, and that's just a for me, causal effect. If I haven't had water, because of course you sweat it out when you run. You feel it in the joints.
Well, and inflammation being a side effect of being dehydrated, that makes that seems it touches my intuition that there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
So now, breath work, breathing, like you said, exercise and breath, where can we start with that? Yeah.
All right. So at one level, you say oxygenation, great, because you're getting oxygen into the body. That's the great way to do it. So breath work, the interesting thing is that in terms of stress, sits in the one of the sources of, the primary source of stress is in the head. It's how we think about things, either a painful past or a fearful future. So it's thoughts. What breath work is at one level is where you follow your breath into your body and then out again, and where in your body do you feel it, in the back of your throat or whatever. Now, what that does, it puts your focus into your body. which takes it out of the head, which is de-stressing. But the other thing too is that when you breathe out slowly, so you've got two breaths, you've got the in-breath and the out-breath. The in-breath triggers the sympathetic nervous system. So you think in contracts, the constriction, there's a constriction, and basically the sympathetic nervous system is an agitation constriction system. So it tightens things up, ready for action. And then the out-breath is the parasympathetic, or the rest and repair, or the rest and relax, rest and digest nervous system. So this is why they say if you want to relax, you breathe in, but breathe out for twice, 3, 4 times as long. And what that does, it tells the brain, well, if he's taking a long time to breathe out, he must be relaxed, and so it relaxes the head. So there is a direct link at that very basic level, and so there's a variety of breath work. I mean, there's hundreds of them. There's a thing called box breathing, which the SEALs use. I don't know if you've heard of it, but you can look on YouTube, and 4 in for 2, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. There is breath work through the nose, so you block one nostril, you breathe in, you block it, and then breathe out. I mean, there's a whole range. And then you've got Wim Hof, his breath. And certainly as you start to build up, that's one of my processes in the morning. There's a half-hour version, so I did it this morning. And when you're in that, you breathe so much, you're just sitting there, hold your breath, and you go, wow, this feels great. So there's a good feeling factor. But it also
is that Wim Hof that you're talking about?
Yeah,
that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So you do a 30-minute breath work Wim Hof based thing in the morning. This morning you did that.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm so glad I asked, because I think that you just got to the core components of why it doesn't have to be yoga, it doesn't have to be Ashtanga. Like it's just the fact that your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system relaxing you, de-stressing, getting the oxygen in. I think that's just really fabulous. So now that we have that base,
right,
that basis.
Okay. So on the assumption that you're doing those things, and that's there, but we're still surrounded by challenging / threatening environments. So COVID is an obvious example where we walked into a massive worldwide uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so now what we're talking about is how we think. And so the thing that leaks the energy the most, the primary leaker of energy, is our thinking. And it's the meaning that we make of any situation. And a lot of people say that's the inner critic or the monkey mind. And it happens at the semi and the subconscious levels. So we typically aren't aware of the thought process, but we are aware of the feeling, the agitation, the anxiety, the worry, the stress. Now, what I've found, because I went down the route of the meditation, the yoga, the stretching, the breath work, and so on, and that is fantastic, and that works, but it's slow and it's general. What I'm interested in and what I teach is fast and specific. So it's a science-based backed process where you're actually able to unentangle those emotional tripwires, specific emotional tripwires, which suck your energy. So let me give you an example. There was a barrister. So she's a lawyer. She's an appellate. So she's into appeals. She had decided, she's a third-generation lawyer. She had decided to be great, not just be good, to be great, doing it for 15 years and getting increasingly better at it. But had recently been ripped apart by a judge who was obviously in a bad mood and really publicly just eviscerated her, just tore into her. Now, as a result of that, it crushed her confidence. So clearly there's something going on in her head going, oh, no, I don't know if I'm up for this anymore. That had all sorts of physical impacts on her. So she was worried. She was second-guessing herself, self-sabotaging because she wouldn't get on to procrastinating because she wouldn't get onto files. She'd get home, she was distracted, so she wouldn't be a good parent, so she felt guilty, etc., etc.
It's a feedback loop.
Absolutely. So when I asked her about, well, what specifically went on in you at the time when you had that situation with that judge, she was telling me, well, what were the thoughts under the surface? And it was things like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Oh, I'm hopeless. I'll never be any good. And then it came out, I am a failure. So in fact, what she hadn't realized was going on in her head. And in fact, that was the instruction from her head to her body that I am a failure. And consequently, if that's because the brain is a goal-achieving machine, I'm a failure. Okay, well, I'll create the environment where you are a failure. And so she was struggling to continue under that barrage of I am a failure. Now, there's actually a deeper truth that sits underneath that. And this is what it helped her discover for herself. And what it was in fact, because she wants to be in the appeals work, which is far sharper than anyone and everyone else, she had to be sharper, had to see into the crevices and cracks that other people hadn't. That in fact, the judge doing that to her was exactly the very thing that she needed to become very sharp. So steel against steel, it was a sharpening her up. So what we're able to invert was that rather than that critical thinking of I'm a failure was this is great because I am becoming sharper by that in that adversarial situation. Now, that's just one example, but that was a very specific one. Disentangled her from that, and she was able to flow on. So just to try and give you an example.
Yeah, it's a great example. And it brings to mind for me what we started with, which is you've got to be clear with yourself. And you must, and I think part of that is not just what you're saying to yourself in terms of what you're then going to say to the people that are following you or whatever, but being clear, like on much deeper levels about what's going on and these unconscious, semi-conscious stories that we're telling ourselves and these unconscious, semi-conscious beliefs that are getting in our way. And like, there's so much to unravel. And I think it feels to me like, like all that stuff gets concentrated the bigger the leadership level gets, like the more people that are depending on you, the more budget, the more it matters to the world, like all that stuff gets concentrated and it can either move someone forward or really slow them down.
Yeah. So I the analogies that I have is that you can be an energy colander, which is like a sieve.
My mind is like a sieve.
Yeah. Or an energy chalice. And so I think it's two things. We need to know how to plug the holes that are sapping the energy, so that limiting belief thing, but also how do we get top quality energy coming in? And that's where that's, to my perspective, there's energy around us. There's energy in nature. There's energy in the sun. I mean, there's energy all around us. How do we plug into that? And so, not meaning to be woo-woo, but I think we all walk around. At one point, we're all connected to the tree of life that is inside our mother's womb via the umbilical cord that got cut. So we're now still walking around with an extension cord looking to plug into where energy is. Now, we do it in the evening. We go to sleep at night, so we plug into the great plasma and we get energy from there. But consciously, how do we plug into eternal energy or great supply of energy? And I think we do that through a purpose statement. So I help people with a 3 to 5 word purpose statement. Why 3 to 5? Easy to remember. And I'll give you an example of how potent that can be. I call it a resonant. It's got to be a resonant because everyone can come up with a vision statement or a mission statement, and it can be quite intellectual. But for me, it's got to be resonant, which means every cell in your body resonates. Yeah. So I was working with a lady. She was in her late 40s. She'd been a dedicated, purposeful mother, meaning she dedicated herself to being a fantastic mother, and she was, but her 2 daughters left home. So she found herself drifting at a loose end. So we went through this process, and she came up with the phrase, gracefully relentless.
That's great. And so I love that.
And so you and I can look at that and go, I mean, there's a poetic melody to those words. Well, I'm not quite sure what does that mean? Now, it doesn't matter what we think, it's that it resonated for her. Now, 3 years later, she came back to me and said, do you remember that exercise we went through? And I said, yes. She said, do you remember the phrase? And I went, no. She said, well, let me show you something. And she pulled up her sleeve of her blouse and she had it tattooed on her forearm. That's what I mean by resonant. So it just so resonated with her. So that was a reference point for her. Yeah. It was her true north. And at any point, she could say, how close or far am I from that? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, because you're talking about, as a CEO has more and more responsibility, how do you tap into, or how do you stay connected to high energy, is that you need to have those sorts of blueprints or those points of structure, or need to be able to plug yourself in directly, because that is your true north. When you're in that space, if you talk out from that place, you're in a powerful place, and people, that's communication, people get it. When you plug into that place, you're now plugged into intuition, you're now plugged into perception, insight, that you wouldn't otherwise get access to. So it's certainly very helpful in terms of retaining your intactness for a CEO with greater and greater responsibility. So I think you need the two. You need, well, in fact, you have a purpose statement, resonant purpose, and then drops down, you have resonant identities. And that, so what are you as a leader? You need to have a resonant identity. Anyway, we're starting to get into.
So I'm sitting here overlaying this on myself, right? Which I think is kind of what I'm supposed to do, and everybody else listening. And I will say, first of all, gracefully relentless is fabulous. Like, I can see why she'd get that tattooed. I like that. I think I might write that down and just put it on my wall for a little while and get some of that on me.
Right.
And so I think I have one of those, but before I get to it, I will say that I really, really just experienced, I think, what you're saying recently, because I just am coming off last week. I'm the official pitch coach for the Cisco Global Problem Solver Challenge. And you can Google that, and it's really, really cool. Wow. And they've been doing that for about 5 years, and I've been the pitch coach for about 3. And we went from, I think a couple hundred applicants. I'm not sure what the last year's numbers were, but this year there were 1,700 applications and 93 semifinalists, which is just way beyond anything ever. And so I was just not sleeping enough, because we were doing so many pitch coaching sessions for these folks. And it was fabulous, and it was inspirational. But boy, I woke up on Friday morning before a 5-hour session with 10 minutes per person or something, or per group.
Yeah.
And I was tired, and I was laying in bed, and I was feeling a little grumpy that the alarm clock had gone off, and then I had to get up. And then I reminded myself of why I do this.
Yeah.
And I said, I get to make a difference for the people that make a difference.
Yep.
And I imagined all the people that I had already been so inspired by, and I leaped out of bed. Was I still tired? Yeah, a little bit, but it was totally different, Yeah. And that 5 hours was enriching and engaging and fun. And I wasn't done halfway through, and so, that really did just make a big difference. And it's been a little while since I was tired and kind of cranky about getting up, but it really made a difference for me to just remind myself of the honor that I have to make a difference for the people that make a difference.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And then,
that's a brilliant example. Yep, totally.
And then when I hear gracefully relentless, I was like, oh, I don't have one of those. I need one. And then I was like, wait a minute. I kind of do, because when I'm doing my work, who I say I am for people is the drill instructor for your greatness. Now, that's not 2 or 3 words, but
that's okay.
Does that fit?
Yeah. Well, the whole point about resonance, what do I mean by that? So I'll put together a chart, 1 to 10, of energy levels. And the question is, what level does leadership sit at? What energetic level does leadership sit at? And some people say, oh, it's got to be a 9, it's got to be a 10, or some people say, oh, 7, whatever. I think it's 8 and above. 8 and above. And the reason for that is, yes, the leader's got to give energy. So therefore, if I come from an 8, you pick it up as a 7, I'm giving you energy.
Yeah,
if I come from a 7, you pick it up as a 6, I'm not shifting you. If I come from a 6, you pick it up as a 5, I'm sucking your energy. So 8 and above. Now, the other side of that is, I deliberately don't go near 9 or 10, because that's this whole realm of perfection. And perfection doesn't exist. It's a total false misconception. It's a construct that doesn't exist. And if we pitch ourselves at that, we are in for failure. So therefore, I'm happy for a 20% stuff up allowance or compassion allowance or whatever. So therefore, when it comes to the resonance, and this is because whoever the listeners are, you may have your own phrase. The question to ask yourself is, what rating out of 10 would you give that phrase for how energizing it is for you? So when I work with people, it's got to be at least an 8. Sometimes it's 9 or 10. I don't aim for 9 or 10. So therefore, the question for you is, have you got your phrase? Well, what rated out of 10? I make a difference to people who make a difference. Is that what's that? Oh, so you may say 7.5. Great. What would need to happen to make it an 8? Or whatever your phrase is. If it's, that's a solid 8, boom, you're there.
Yeah. That's cool. Good. So, I like this. Where next?
Well, I don't know. Do you want to work on yours or?
Well, I have a question. I actually have a question. Okay. And if this isn't inspiring you to talk about for very long, we can move on. But one of the things that I have been thinking about a lot lately, given some of the coaching engagements I've been doing over the past year, and then thinking back about one of the ongoing things that's just seems to be an issue, I decided I wanted to put my finger on it, and I've got some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you would say from your perspective.
Sure.
There are a lot of people, I think, that are amazing doers.
Yeah.
And they end up in, let's say, in a corporate structure particularly, and they do, right? And they like, if we need something done, we give it to her or we give it to him, right?
Yeah.
And they just get it done and they do. And yet they get passed up for promotions and they don't get really acknowledged and yet the whole department, if you asked anybody objectively, whose back are we riding on? Like everybody knows it, but they don't get promoted. They don't get, the same kind of raises that they think they should get. And I wonder what you think about that system, like the worker bee syndrome, right? Is that something that you bump into much in your things, or is that?
So what's the question inside that?
What's up there? Like why? Because it's not working, right? They do so much work and yet they don't get the praise and or the advancement potential that they would really like. And which is part of the reason they're working so hard is so they can get promoted and stuff.
Okay.
But those seem to be the people that get stuck, right?
Okay. So a couple of things turn up. One is, let's assume for a moment that their boss is not political. That
I mean, could be that, but
yeah. So let's assume that's not the case.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to why are they doing what they are doing. Now, I know on the outside they're working, but when you look at the motivation, see, we live in only two states. One is a state where our thinking has triggered our sympathetic nervous system and we feel the fight, flight, freeze state. So if I'm coming from an inadequacy or I feel a sense of insecurity, that could be driving me.
Yeah.
Or if I'm coming from a sense of competitiveness, I want to beat the next guy, that could be driving me. But if you look at that in terms of how it turns up in the body, it turns up as a feeling that doesn't feel good. So we've got two states. One is what's called the primal state, because our thinking has triggered the primal part of the brain, the fight, flight, freeze part. How do we know if that's happened? Is because the feeling that we feel doesn't feel good. On the other hand, we could come from a powerful state where the feeling that we feel does feel good. Two states, that's it. We can't be in one. We're either in one or the other. We can't be in both at the same time. Okay.
Binary.
Correct. It's just it's red and blue, but it's binary. Now, a motivation could come from the primal state. It could come from a deep sense of insecurity. So therefore, I've got to prove myself. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. They're coming from an empty state. And so that's actually what's coming across with the actions is there's this desperation or insecurity that sits inside it. Or they could be coming from, and so they are very dependent thinkers and
Yeah.
They're coming from an insecurity. Now, equally, still in that red or that primal state is they could be coming from deep competition, which is I want to beat you. But again, that's an agitated state. And so that's actually what comes across with the action. Now, that's very different than a person who's taking bold and inspired action from the blue or powerful state, because there's a relaxedness, there's an openness, there's a genuineness. There is, see, interestingly, red is self-orientated or the primal state.
Yeah. Yep.
Blue, powerful state, is other-orientated.
Yeah.
So think of it in terms of self-obsessed,
very interesting.
Self-obsessed versus other-focused.
Yeah.
Now, leadership is clearly other-focused. And so if they're looking for promotion, where they're coming from is they want others to succeed, they want others to be supported, they're doing these things, there's generosity, blah, blah, blah. That's what comes across. There's a residue. When we do something, we can't not pick up the frequency of where the person's coming from when they do it.
Yeah.
Now, either there's a no hangover, it's just very clean, they do it and they go, oh, that was great. Or there is this sort of bad taste in the mouth, that sort of thing. So coming back to answering your question, people could be doing, but they need to reflect back. What is their actual motivation? Is it coming from a deep sense of red doesn't feel good, therefore I've got to overcome that, or I've got to beat someone else out, which is still self-orientated, or is it more the relaxed, the open, the generous, the other-focused?
Yeah.
So that's in terms of promotion. Who would you want to be promoting?
Right.
Because would you want to be promoting a self-centered person? What tip?
And it's funny you'd say that, because I agree with you, and I think that I have met a number of people who are maybe unconsciously self-obsessed, right? They really do. They care so much, right? And yet that caring has this way of, when it comes from maybe an insecure or a worried place, it kind of loops back and it's about them again, even though they really care. I'm not expressing that very well, but I think that there is one of the things that I say, this is how I'll get myself out of this mouth trap I've walked into. That being super self-aware has its massive upsides.
Yes.
And yet being super self-aware can go over a cliff and start to have massive downsides too, right?
Yep.
I think that's what I was stumbling around with.
Yeah, right. Okay. So is there a question inside that?
Yeah, I guess the question is, how can someone who cares so much and is so doing obsessed, how can they free themselves from the what they don't necessarily even realize is as a self-obsession on some level, because they care about doing the job right, and they care about, getting it done, and they care about, and they genuinely care about those things. But what is the way up and out of the downside of that?
Yeah. So the word that I caught with what you're saying is they want to do the job right. And everyone is seeking
to
do a fantastic job and to do it right. I mean, I think that's embedded into the soul, is to do it right. Yeah. So I totally get it. But in today's world, that's also to get it perfect. And so that's where I think that 20% stuff up allowance on self, because that 20% gives you compassion.
Yeah.
Where I haven't got it right, but that's okay because there are exigencies. I didn't get enough sleep to do the right job, or I've got to give myself compassion, especially in today's world. So I think the piece that's missing inside of all that, because you can do until you run out. And the job, really, the question to ask is, how sustainable is my current state?
Yeah.
Because the red state, the primal state, is consuming or exhausting. You can run. And run, and then you're, up until about 30, 40, I'm in my 60s. You don't have the same energy, right? So you got to be far more conservative with your energy. You got to ask the question: is it sustainable? Now, the blue state is sustainable. So it comes back to the reason why they're doing it. What's driving them? Is that sustainable? Yeah. And if not, what needs to happen to make it sustainable?
Yeah. Thanks for just chasing this down with me. I think it's really clarified my view of this. And I think one of the big things, because I'm holding all these people in my head as we're talking about them, right? And I'm running these heuristics against my experience of them. And I think there is this level of what I might call a lack of self-compassion.
Okay.
That I think is a somewhat common element there, right?
Right.
And so that self-compassion, and so I'm coining a term, and I mean it to be a triggering term around this. Like, I want, if people get triggered by it, that means that that they need to talk about it, right? Yeah. But I call it leadership me time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that I think about this realm, along with everything that we've just uncovered that I think fits like a glove, is that people in that position, they do all the time. They never, ever make leadership me time. Number one, to actually lead. They're always following by just doing the do, right? They never actually take time to sit down and think strategically and make suggestions and show up as a leader along with all that doing, because the doing seems like the thing, right? Oh, well, I got to get that done. How am I ever? I don't have leadership, right? But I love saying leadership me time, just because I can imagine that it's triggering if to somebody in that state. And then we can talk about, why is it triggering? Well, one might be a lack of self-compassion and just like, what happened? What does leadership me time even look like? Why would you be triggered by it? Let's talk about what it even is, and what does that, what have we just made it mean that gets us a little bit like, oh, well, what leadership? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So a couple of things turn up when you say that. I'd like to offer a refinement, if I could, to
please. Yes.
Leadership we time.
Oh, that's good.
Because when you're spending time, you say, well, I'm spending time with myself. No, you're actually spending time with yourself and silence, or you're spending time with yourself, self-reflecting. So you're acknowledging your body. And so this concept of we rather than me, I think, is essential, because there's you, and then there's your purpose statement, which is like your cord that plugs you into the power supply. So it's a we. In combination, we are transmitting out. So and I think this whole thing of it's all to do with me, then you've got to come up with the energy yourself, whereas opposed to if it's we. And now the we also extends to your tribe, or the people who support you, the people who have your back. But I get what you're saying. Me time is me and my thoughts, me and reflection, me and but it's me and something else. So it's we time. Okay.
Yeah. That's really good. I like that.
Because the two most powerful words for a leader to utter are we and together.
Yeah.
So rather than you made a mistake, it's, look, we made a mistake and together we will do something about it. As opposed to, well, you made a mistake, so what are you going to do about it? Which is isolating. There's putting a distance, and
it speaks to two very different leadership philosophies, doesn't it? Because I think that you couldn't say we and together inauthentically and have it work. And I think that there are just some people who wouldn't even think to say we and together, right? So, I think it points to two different, really fundamentally different approaches.
Well, at a neurobiological level, we moves us to a prefrontal cortex, and it's where things combine. So you feel it builds trust. We're part of something, we belong together. Whereas I trigger your sympathetic nervous system. You go into a minor fight, flight, or freeze. You've got to do something about this. That's what goes on. And that actually restricts your thinking. You're unable to come up with solutions, and then therefore you are more able to be led.
Yeah.
Whereas the we, if we say, look, we can do it. What are your thoughts? Let's do this collaboratively. Then you've actually been moved into a high thinking process. There was a second thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. What were you saying before this?
Well, not leadership me time before that.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. The leadership me time.
I mean, and I can imagine unpacking that as leadership me time just to kind of get everybody's feathers up, and then rolling it over to it's actually leadership we time. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah. So the second
what were you going to say?
Thing is, see, there are multiple dimensions, multiple identities as a leader. So you can say, okay, so Bruce, what sort of leader are you? And you can say, well, I am a, and then put an adjective. I am a something leader. I am a compassionate leader, or I am a driven leader, or I am a whatever it is. And most people don't have that degree of clarity. Now, sometimes it's I am an adjective and adjective leader. So I did an exercise recently with a CEO, and I said, so what are you? Are you an advocate? Are you a facilitator? Are you a CEO? Are you a leader? So the first thing in the noun, I've got to get the noun right. I'm a leader.
Yeah.
Now, the next word, we spent ages. What sort of leader are you? Well, what do you mean? Yeah, what sort of? And we spent time. We had to get to an 8. That's where leadership energization happens. And interestingly, his was I am an energizing leader. And as soon as we got there, we went, oh wow, that's me. This, that, the other thing.
Yeah.
Now he's got to live up to it, because that he now is very clear about who he is to himself. So in the context of what you're saying, so his name is Dean. He said, so Dean, you're an energizer. Oh, absolutely. All right, cool. So how do you energize yourself? How do you energize your people? How do you energize, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
So it very much depends. You've got to get to what is the resonant. Now, very few people will say, I'm an exhausting leader. But that's what they do, or that's their impact. But they'll never, but as soon as they state it, I am a such and such, they're like, oh, no, I'm not. Okay, so if that's what you say you are, here's the other interesting one. I did this with another guy, another CEO, and he said, I am a trusted leader. I am he felt really good about it. Wasn't quite there. But he felt pretty good about it. We had another conversation the next week, and he had difficulty delegating. And so I said, hang on. You're saying you're a trusted, people can trust you, but you don't trust other people. And so with a slight change in the wording, he became a trusting leader. That changed his whole approach. So the power of that, what I call a resonant identity, is powerful. So you said earlier about the me time. What turned up in my head was, so I wonder what their identity is unto themselves as a leader.
Yeah.
I am a compassionate self-leader. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what are you? Now, most people don't think at this level, but that is so powerful, because once you have clarity, you go, well, now I know how I need to behave.
Yeah. Yep. It is amazing. I mean, it just puts me back to the incredible power of language.
Totally. Yeah.
What a thing. Oh my gosh. Like there's a reason that's always the first thing in the spiritual books, right? And then there was the word, right? And the word was good. And it's like, wow. Ding, 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 right? Just the incredible power of words. So Bruce, I know that we're getting to the bottom of the hour here, and I don't think either of us have to absolutely go this second. So I want to ask you before we kind of wrap it up.
Sure.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you were thinking about, or anything that you think, oh yeah, this one more thing, John?
Well, yeah. Okay, so there's a bit of a backstory to this, but I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And that is that, so this truth came at a vital time in my life. So about 4.5 years ago, 2 daughters, younger one, Danny, elder one, Kylie. The younger one, Danny, 25, was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer.
Oh.
Which was absolutely devastating, and I mean, at an existential level, this just ripped. I literally felt like
there's not words.
The skin had been taken off my body. Anyway, during the process of that, and unfortunately, she did pass. Now,
Bruce, I'm so sorry.
As that was happening, of course, I felt out of my depth. I really didn't know how to act, and I just felt shell-shocked. So I got counselling. And this lady was very forthright And no, so I explained it to her, and so this is the situation. She said, "Look, I've got to tell you something, Bruce, up front." Quite strong, actually. And I said, "Oh, because you just say counselling, it's softer." She said,
"Yeah,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with Danny." I went, "What?" She said, "There's absolutely nothing wrong with Danny. Parts of her have cancer." Now, what a subtlety, but what a distinction! Because in that moment, I realized I had been talking to Danny as a broken, or as a failing, as an unhealthy, as a diminished person.
Yeah. Wow.
But she said, there is nothing wrong with Danny. Danny is intact. Parts of her have cancer.
Whew.
And the truth of that struck me, and it just totally changed my perspective on Danny. I now spoke to the entirety, to the intact Danny. And yes, obviously we have to deal with the diminished Danny. Now, what's the relevance of this to do with leadership is that we all have our own doubts. We all have our own anxieties and so on. There is nothing wrong with you. Parts of you are leaking energy. There's nothing wrong with your people. Parts of them are leaking energy. It's our job as a leader to help them refocus that energy. And obviously we need the understanding as how to do that. But if you approach yourself and your people from that perspective, there are parts of me that aren't working so well. Fundamentally, I'm intact. Then that straight away, that gives you something solid to work out from, and recognizing there's areas to work on. But it's not that, geez, I'm so broken, I'm so this, I'm so that. No. Parts of you. So that would be my final message would be, you're fine. You're working well. The you of you, parts of you are leaking energy and not doing as well as you'd like. So it's subtle distinction.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm very sorry for your loss, and what a thing to get out of that. I think that, that must make a difference for lots and lots of people that you touch.
Yeah, that's one of there are a number of things in that whole journey. As traumatic as it was, there are a whole I call them Danny's gifts, and that was one of them, which are now embedded as part of pillars of my life.
Yeah.
And it's how I continue to honor her life and what she stood for. But I was introduced to many truths which I think are resonant truths, and that was one.
Yeah. Well, and if I may, the thing that I would just like to thank you for, that I got on a completely different level, I often say, speak to your people like they're great, no matter how they're behaving in the moment, which I think is just another way to say what you just said.
Yeah, totally.
The place where I had never linked that though was for me. Even on a bad day, I can speak to myself like I'm great, no matter how I'm acting or feeling in the moment. And I don't know why that made me cry, but that is going to make a difference for me. Thank you, Danny. And I will make sure that makes a difference for as many people as I can possibly touch.
Fantastic. Well, I've enjoyed. I feel a kindred spirit, and I just love your phrase of making a difference to the people who want to make a difference. I mean, that totally resonates, and I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me in that, Bruce. And I think that you have, and I think that you do, and you will continue to. So I'll look forward to talking to you again. We'll have to have you come back again and check in with us down the road. And, you can find Bruce. We'll put those things in the show notes. You can go to his website at flowpreneur.com or .co. I keep saying it's co, and linkedin.com/in/Bruce S. Ross. And Bruce, thank you for taking the time and zipping your electrons all the way over here from New Zealand to be with me. And I'll look forward to talking with you again.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.